the future of townships, the future of villages, and the future of really black communities or African communities. So I wanted to talk about this because this is one thing I've always had in my mind, and I've always felt like because I mean currently now I just left university and looking at how the order of things happen in terms of when a kid goes to school, then graduate, go to high school, graduate, go to university, graduate, and then of course they're kicked into the real world of being an employee or maybe a business person. Usually, success for them is like your typical black child. And if I'm wrong, it's okay. You can correct me, right? But from my perspective and from my experiences, it's always that you come from the township or the village or disadvantaged area. You go to school, get good grades, you pass, get to university, get good grades, graduate, get a job, and then try as much as you can to escape. Because that's how I see it, to escape from your background, from that disadvantaged community, right? But honestly, I don't think that's actually going to help solve our problem, right? I don't think it's going to help solve the the black experience problem when it comes to townships. Also, one thing that I didn't even know, and I discovered this through my mentor. Well, I had a mentor who I'd like to call him. He was more of a political and life mentor more than a business mentor, right? Because he was very well knowledge. In fact, he studied um, political sciences. So he made me realized that in fact many townships were not, they were actually designed like that. These are the things that I discovered. I mean, I come from an engineering background, so there wasn't much that I knew about sociology and all the social engineering and stuff like that, because I've once come across a tweet. Someone, I think, posted a tweet that said that a lot of black people in South Africa like saying, "Hey, Ekasi, ilas Puma khona," which means like the township is where we come from. And then someone said, "No, the township is not actually where we come from. The township is what was designed for us to stay in." Right? And of course, that's also basically what my mentor taught me at the time. And so for me, the idea of escaping from townships or villages and from our hometowns, basically from these places that we come from, is going to actually bring slower progress compared to us how can I say, I don't want to say reorganizing, but restructuring and redesigning our townships, right? Because anything can really be redesigned and actually changed into something of so much high value that it would leave you in disbelief. Now, I'm not saying that I know all the answers to this, but sometimes, I mean, I mean, we all have an imagination for to try and come up with better things, right? I mean, when you imagine something, you always imagine for the best, right? So I can only there was a time I just sat down, I was like, but this thing of actually trying to escape from the township is highly, highly inefficient compared to us. Rather, instead of escaping, we redesign it, right? Redesign it, restructure it, and make it more, of course, conducive, and even create value, build value within that township, within that community, right? I don't know how, but for me, my imagination really, because I was so much concerned about this. And I think why I was concerned about this is because as I was going through university and getting close and closer to my final years, I started thinking about, man, so I'm basically going to graduate and I'm going to get probably a very good job with a decent salary, and I'll buy probably a nice fancy car, and then I'll come and visit my hometown every now and then. But for me personally, deep down within, it wouldn't it I knew from the get-go that that wouldn't satisfy me completely, because I always say, like of course I'm 27, by the way. I'm 27 years old, and I feel like for the youth, my age, between the basically the youth age, the age group of what is defined as the youth, we should be more concerned about how can we actually change what we're doing, like change our communities, I meant, right? And what I mean by this is that not just be too worried about yourself or too concerned about yourself, and then after you're done, then you just go and escape and move to the suburbs and that's it. Because I don't think, then if that's the case, we're not even running away from the problem. I mean, if that's the case, then that means we're just running away from the problem. I once mentioned before that, and this was really out of respect, right? because the government is already trying. A lot of other organizations are already trying to like make our society better. But I once pointed out that if if we were gonna try and if we think that sending one child in every community or in every household, right, typically where the income is quite low, if we're gonna send one child to university for every 4 years, and we think that that will in the long run solve black people coming out of poverty, then we will never achieve it, because the rate that poverty increases is much quicker than that of graduates and actually even employment. In fact, I once came across a post on social media of, I think it was Wits university students, right? So they were protesting and they were wearing their graduation gowns. They were wearing their graduation gowns and they were holding placards about how they want employment. Uh, Honestly, that didn't sit well with me, because you know I truly, truly believe that. I mean, many, many years ago, in around 1976, right, students then were fighting for political freedom, right? I would like to say now there's more of like, it's now more about economic freedom that's being fought for, right? And one way to fight economic freedom is not it's not about standing on the street and actually holding a placard and saying that we want jobs. It's like I've realized, like, and I used to have this kind of um, I don't want to call it a mentality, right? Or let me just say it's a programming or an upbringing. I've always seen jobs and companies as these entities that are just there. I never understood how they came about. So I remember when I was in matric, I was so excited that one day I want to work for NASA. I want to work for, I think it was some company that creates aeroplanes, right? I think it was Boeing. I really don't remember, but without realizing that those actually companies that were started by people, and they might have taken long, but they are not things that were existing and have ever existed since the beginning of time. They were actually started by people. So once I came out of that mindset, then did I realize that, hey, once I came out of that mindset and then I looked at the South African status quo, especially the socio-economic status quo of South Africa, then I felt that, you know what, there is no way that I can be excited to actually go and find a job. I should, and I understand, like, starting a business is really so much of a struggle. Even for me, there are days where I feel like giving up, right? But I obviously remind myself of why I started, and really that's what keeps me going. And just also just challenging myself, and also just having, to challenge my existence, right? So so I truly believe that indeed, because now it's more of like an economic um, freedom that we're fighting for. And maybe it's not a fight, but basically that's what we're seeking, right? We're all seeking economic freedom. It shouldn't be through looking for jobs, but rather, of course, creating jobs. And that's very tough. And like I've mentioned before, that the South African entrepreneurial ecosystem is still quite weak, right? But it's growing, right? We just came out of political freedom, what, I think it's 20, less than 25 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. Um, so that's really not so long ago, right? And there's still a lot of development that still need to happen, but definitely being job creators than job seekers is what's needed right now. I mean, the unemployment rate is so high. I even forgot how much it is. I think it was around 40% youth unemployment rate. So in no way should we be complaining about or looking for jobs. I mean, it's tough for me. Now I'll speak again about my experience. It's tough every day having to wake up. I mean, I was selling on the streets. I still am, but I took a break because I'm also working on an online business. So I'm running an online business, but I'm also working on the streets, because I've realized that creating an online business doesn't bring income immediately. Well, depending on what kind it is, right? But for me, the one that I'm working on, it requires me to create to build the value first, right? Maybe let me say medium to long term value, building it first. So, and as much as I'm learning also, that the learning that I'm going through, or the learning that I'm experiencing through running this online business, that's also part of the value that I know that, okay, this value at some point I'll have to then start teaching people, because they'll need that knowledge, maybe that's when I'll start monetizing off of it as well. But for now, I thought, okay, then let me go out there and sell on the streets, because also, and I think which is very important, sales is the number one input. I've learned this on my journey, that sales is actually the number one skill that you need as an entrepreneur, right? Well, as a social entrepreneur as well, because that's what I call myself. I think I'm more concerned about what society, like I'm more concerned about social problems, and since it's really draining for an African to solve their social problems while they're still trying to also make money for themselves, because I mean, already we've been so economically excluded for so long that we are so behind. That's why social enterprise is much more better